Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'm going to be showing you how I made a head back for my Feeple65 Ine. I got this faceplate in a split, so I don't have a head back for it. I had intended to buy one, and then Fairyland closed for restructuring and they were no longer available. Since I don't know when they're going to have the Feeple65 headbacks available again, I decided I would go ahead and make my own, so that I could get this all started. I didn't record the very beginning, because I wasn't sure if my plan was going to work. I started applying Apoxie Sculpt clay onto half of a Christmas ornament that snaps together. But now I have to finish building up the rest of it. Hopefully the Apoxie Sculpt I have will still be good, since this is what I used for Rune's modification several years ago. Before I mix my clay, I wrap the faceplate in plastic wrap. This allows me to sculpt against the faceplate, and lets me fit the pieces together without worrying about the epoxy getting on the faceplate and messing things up. I don't really like the new style of faceplate, and I'm not really sure why they changed it. I like the kind that For All has much better. I had considered adding magnets instead of using the button latch at the top of the head back, but I also don't really want to modify the faceplate more than I have to, so I'll see if I can make a working button latch anyway. I feel like I work better in subtractive methods, so I'll probably end up carving a lot of this clay back off. Fortunately, everything I'm using is stuff I already had on hand, so it doesn't actually cost me anything to make this. It's also a really good experience for sculpting, which is something I've never really done before aside from modifications. I'm looking forward to being able to make dolls of my own. Hopefully this will teach me a lot of new methods. One of the big challenges of doing this is that I don't really want to make an exact copy of Fairyland's head back. The head back I make is going to have to be similar, or else the faceplate won't fit. But I also don't really want to directly copy their work. Sometimes it's difficult to be an artist. Generally speaking, any time that you make a copy of something for personal use, it's not really a big deal. But I still wish I could figure out some mechanics of my own that would work for this faceplate. Unfortunately, I'm not that advanced yet, so I'll have to keep it pretty close to what Fairyland originally engineered. That means using a latch that fits inside the chin, one at the top of the head, and possibly some braces at the side of the head back to keep the faceplate steady. I try to work at it a little at a time, building up new layers of epoxy every couple of days. That way everything is solidly cured before I put on the next layer. At first there are a lot of gaps that need to be filled. I fill them in as best as I can. But I know I'll have to make adjustments, because otherwise this won't fit inside the faceplate. It has some odd notches and things inside, so I have to work around those. This is probably the most complicated thing I've ever tried to make from scratch. It could be because I started with the round base, but it doesn't really seem as difficult as I expected. The hardest part is waiting for the epoxy to cure. The little bump on the top is going to drive me crazy. The chin piece seems to fit pretty well, although it's much too wide and I'll have to narrow it down. I use water as I'm sculpting to try to keep things as smooth as possible, but as usual, I'll finish with bondo at the end of everything. I'm not sure about these little side supports. They don't really seem to be doing much of anything. I'll leave them on until they cure, but if they don't seem to be adding anything, I'll pop them back off later. One big difference between the official head back and the one that I'm making is that mine uses an S-hook to hold the head on, instead of relying on a locking mechanism. These little side things may cause problems if they get in the way of getting the S-hook through. At this point everything is bulked up enough that I think it's time to start paring down. I start by using a really sharp razor blade to cut away the extra clay. For things like this it's important to make sure it's sharp, because you're actually more likely to cut yourself with a dull knife. Right now it's a pretty good fit, but I know I'll have some gaps after I sand everything down. Now that I'm refining the shape, I see I actually made the neck come too far down. so the faceplate is kind of tilted downward. I'll use a Dremel to take that off. I'll probably also use the Dremel to sand most of the head back. It'll save a lot of effort, and it'll be better for my bad shoulder too. Unfortunately, the Dremel's spitting all the dust directly at my camera, and I don't really want to mess it up, so I'm going to go outside, and I'll just show you the progress. After the first round of sanding, everything is a lot closer to smooth. This tongue piece that fits inside the faceplate is not quite the right shape, and it rubs a little bit. There are also still some areas that rise above the faceplate, so I'll need to level them out. I try to mark everything so that when I take it back outside, I'll know what I need to sand without having to take the faceplate with me. And I really don't like those little side wings, so I'm going to pop those off. They don't really add much stability at all. Since I sanded down the neck, I'll also need to carve in here. The second round of sanding gets me a much cleaner fit, but I still need to take this in farther. The nice thing about the sanding is that I can do it all in one day. I've also started opening up the hole for the S-hook. Just for fun, I'm going to add a little shape to the back of the neck too. It's a small thing, but I think it'll look nice. Everything I think needs refined I'll add markings to. When I bring it back inside again, it looks pretty good. So now it's time to finish that S-hook slot. At first I try my razor blade and file, but I don't think that's going to have enough oomph. Instead I turn to my battery-powered Dremel. I use an engraving bit to mark the edges first. That way as I'm drilling, my drill bit won't slip beyond these boundaries. That'll prevent damage. Then I'll turn to the drill bit to hollow everything out. Anytime you do a project like this, it's really important to make sure you have proper respiratory protection. I know I mention that every time I'm working on something, but that's because it's just that important. A good respirator from a hardware store only costs about $30, and the refill cartridges are about $10. If you care for them properly, they can last a long time. But no matter what the cost is, your health is worth it. Now I'll add the little slot where the S-hook will sit. For some reason I thought adding this would be harder. A lot of this has really surprised me with how easy it is. The neck hole is still too shallow, so I'll use a cutting bit to make it deeper. I'm just kind of eyeballing this, and I probably shouldn't have, because I actually don't know what doll body this might fit on. But I suppose whatever I end up getting for her, I'll be able to modify the neck to work with this. Then, after I'm happy with the fit, it's time to start refining. I smother the whole thing with bondo putty, which will help fill in the gaps and even out the head back. There are a few gaps around the faceplate, but I don't think that's going to be a problem for this doll. This will all be covered by a wig anyway. I could keep working at it to make it perfect, but I don't know how long that'll take me, and after a while it starts getting exhausting. They say that perfect is the enemy of done. So in this case, I'm going to choose slightly imperfect and get it done faster so that I can start moving forward with this project. Everything I make can always be better. But one thing I've learned from writing is that no matter how long I work at something, eventually I have to call it finished. The only way you can progress is by moving on and doing more projects instead of working on the same one over and over again. Every time you start a new project, you learn more. And just like how I can never be a better writer unless I write more books and learn more about plot structure, I won't be a better sculptor until I've sculpted more things. This is good enough to hold a faceplate on a body, so I'm going to call it good enough for this doll. Even though there are a few gaps, it's pretty secure. I don't think the fit will be a problem, and it's not going to just fall off either. So even though I'm a novice, I'm pretty proud of how this turned out. I'm still undecided of whether or not I'm going to cast it in resin. I don't really need to, but this piece is really heavy. There are just a few uneven places that are still bothering me, so before I primer it, I'll put a little bit of spot putty on those. I'm not going to get hung up on it though. After the next round of puttying, I'm gonna call it done. So that's my finished result. An imperfect but totally functional head back. Next we'll be coating it in primer to make sure everything is as smooth as it needs to be in important places, and then I can airbrush it to match. That's all for today though. Thanks for watching. Bye.